Welcome to Pleasure Uprising. I'm Dr. Laura Juergens, intimacy coach, somatic practitioner, and your guide to getting out of your head and into your body, your desire, and your real capacity for connection. This show is for people who are done performing and ready to actually feel it. Let's go. So there's a specific kind of person who is the hardest for me to help. And it's not because they aren't suffering or because they don't have insight or because I couldn't help them if they actually came to me. But it's because they don't actually come forward for the help they need. And their entire identity is organized around not needing help. And so they don't knock on my door. And they don't let themselves actually come forward and say, hey, I need a specialist here. And they are, interestingly, usually the most capable people in the room in a lot of other areas. They've built something amazing, like a business, a career, a family, an empire sometimes. And they know how to solve problems. They've been solving them their whole lives, often since they were very young. And being good at solving problems became such a part of who they are that they have a hard time understanding when they need help and giving themselves permission to ask for it. And I want to talk about that because I think a lot of us, even if we're not entirely there, sometimes we are kind of stuck in the same place. If you're entirely there, then you might not even be listening to this podcast, right? So those folks are the hardest to help because I never even get access to them. And every now and then a partner will kind of drag them in this door. And they're so resistant to even the idea of needing help that they don't believe in doing it. And I can't really work with that. Because if you don't want any help, then I can't give it, right? But most people aren't 100% in that camp, but there's a lot of us, and I was one of them I had definitely like a whole foot in that camp. I had maybe staked out some area, a tent in that general vicinity. And the thing is, I think when it comes to sex and relationships, it's actually worse than it is in almost any other area for those people who have at least a foot over there, like I did. And when we do realize, and I'm just going to include myself in this group because I really was there, not in the totally resistant to any help. I actually really like receiving help, which was a gift and one of the things that helped me actually get help, obviously. But I was in the do it myself, super independent, high achiever, like I can figure this out camp. And when we, in that camp, realize that we need to work on things like relationships or our sex life, the intimate parts of our life, a lot of times we're still trying to do it with our heads like we do everything else. We're like, okay, I'm going to read books. I'm going to research it online and look for advice, sex advice online, right? I'm going to try to logic my way through conversations with my partner. Oh my gosh, does that backfire? Ask me how I know. Also, I'm not going to look anywhere inside my body. I'm going to be looking outward for an expert to tell me what to do, but I don't actually want to talk to somebody about it. I don't actually want to get real help because I think I can do it myself. And then we get frustrated when all that stuff doesn't work. So it's like, oh, nothing works, right? Again, ask me how I know. So today we're going to talk about all of this. And I have titled this episode, The Last Place That High Achievers Give Themselves Permission, for a reason, and I think that will become clear. I left my relationship to my sexuality, to intimacy, as the last frontier of what I worked on in all of my sort of growing and healing journey. And, or at least the last frontier of what I knew I needed to work on. I found some other things through the process of opening up the sexuality and intimacy piece that have been incredibly valuable that I wouldn't have even known about if I hadn't looked there. But I didn't go to sexuality and intimacy until it was staring me in the face, until everything else was sorted, right? I had done all the work on burnout, on work-life balance, on my relationship to money, on my self-talk. I had done work on I had stopped having to take antidepressants, which I was on for 15 years because of all the coaching and healing work I had done. Yay. I'm so glad I did all of that. But I really did leave my intimacy and my sexuality as last. And for a while, when I decided I needed to go there, I tried the head-based stuff, the like thinking about it, talking about it, when these like frustrated conversations with my partner. None of that was working. And I finally went to somatic body up work, which we'll talk about more today. And it changed absolutely everything for me in the best possible way. And it was the thing that unlocked all of me. And of course that makes sense, right? Our eroticism, our sexuality, it's in our bodies. It's not just in our heads. Even though our heads are an important sex organ, our brains are an important sex organ, they're just one piece of the puzzle. And the lot of the puzzle, the whole rest of the puzzle is like the whole body, right? So it changed my life, my relationship, my sex life in these massive, beautiful ways, and also who I am as a person. And I have become softer, able to be in more connection, a better friend, able to hold kind boundaries, a more joyful person, way more relaxed. I sleep better. All that in addition to having way better sex and a relationship that truly feels like a refuge. I'm so glad I did that. But so many of us very highly competent people, and I will put myself in that category. And at the time, when I first started this journey, I was a science professor and I had worked really hard to get there. And, I would say I was a high achieving person, right? I, just like many high achieving people, stayed stuck for way longer than I necessarily needed to. Because, like many of those people, I was deprioritizing the thing in our lives that actually brings the most fulfillment. All the research on happiness shows that our closest intimate relationships are the thing that brings the most happiness. So here I was feeling like I didn't know how to really access my own erotic self. And I'm trying to be in a long-term relationship with someone who I loved dearly, but didn't really know how to connect with sexually and didn't know how to talk about that, didn't really know how to do real intimacy. But I don't think either of us knew that we didn't know. We just knew something was off and it wasn't feeling good and that we had conflict, right? We didn't know what we didn't know though. And what I didn't know was that the foundation was my erotic relationship to myself that needed to be healed first before I could actually have a better erotic relationship and a better intimate, vulnerable relationship with my partner.
Quick break. If you are listening to this show, something in your intimate life may not be where you want it to be. And if you've been trying to think or talk your way through it and it's not quite working, that's not a you problem. That's just a method problem. I made a free guide to help called Get Out of Your Head, a starter guide to releasing the pressure, shame, and shoulds around intimacy. It has some reflection exercises that go deeper than anything you'll typically find in a freebie, and most people feel something shift after just the first one. So go grab it at laurajurgens.com/guide, and the link is in the show notes.
So I want to just help you save some time in your life and some pain and some stuckness by talking about what gets in our way as high achievers in giving ourselves permission to get the help that we need and to also address this specific arena of challenges. Intimacy, that romantic relationship, attachment, all of that, sexuality. It is, I think part of it is this overwhelming message we get from our culture that is a straight up lie. And if you hear this and think you may kind of believe it, there's a part of you that believes it, then I want to really encourage you to realize that this isn't yours. Just because you kind of believe it doesn't mean you chose this thought, doesn't mean you chose this belief. It was given to you by the culture, and it is fucked up. And it goes something like this. I'm supposed to just know how to do sex and relationships. Like just know, naturally, innately, magically, just know. I'm supposed to just know how to do sex and relationships. This is a complete fallacy, a complete lie. It makes zero sense that you would just naturally, magically know. But it makes total sense for our very sex-shaming, intimacy-avoidant culture to teach us and train us in this belief. We have a culture that teaches largely abstinence as the only sex education most people get. Maybe a little STI prevention, maybe if you're lucky, you've got some pregnancy prevention or some birth control education. Absolutely nothing about pleasure. Heaven forbid we even talk about women's arousal. People don't even know what that looks like, even women themselves. Nothing about how to be truly intimate, nothing about vulnerability. And then people are left with porn, which is all fake. And look, I have mixed feelings about porn. I think there's some positive ethical porn out there. It's still fake. It's entertainment. And most of it is made for men. The culture around porn is entertainment for men. It is not sex education. And it's obvious when you think about it, right? When somebody like me says that out loud, you're like, yeah, of course, porn is not real sex, right? But your subconscious brain, when it gets no other information about sex and intimacy, and all it sees is porn, it's gonna think that's how I'm supposed to quote unquote do it. And so, oh my gosh, it's no wonder everyone is running around with totally messed up ideas about how to quote unquote do real sex. And that's not our fault. I was like, until I actually got trained, real deep training in sexuality, I didn't know how to do sex, and I was a smart, capable biology professor. Most people don't, and there's nothing wrong with you for that. You're not supposed to just know how to do it, especially when you're given all this false information and avoidance and shaming around it. And I would say the same thing with relationships, because we're taught and modeled really dysfunctional, codependent, passive-aggressive ways of relating in our culture, in most of our families. I mean, not our parents' fault necessarily. Certainly it was mine. I had really bad parents. But most people who have like well-intentioned parents, it's not their fault, but this is what they learned. And so it's just these generational patterns that are passed down. And then, the way that we talk in the media, in school, all these things, really dysfunctional ways of relating. And we're magically supposed to know just how to have secure relationships with clean, kind boundaries and open, vulnerable intimacy when nobody's ever modeled that for us or practiced it with us before. So I just want to say, let's be sure we don't accidentally swallow that cultural lie that we're somehow supposed to just magically know how to do sex and relationships. That lie is not a belief that came from you. You weren't born with that belief. And you are allowed to need to learn for sex and intimacy. And a lot of it, frankly, is unlearning. A lot of it is unlearning the cultural messages and the things that were passed down to you. And even high achievers in any other area of life still need that learning and unlearning. And a lot of the learning is about learning about ourselves, our own bodies, our own responses, and our partners, and how our partners work, and their bodies, and their responses, and their needs, right? And that's not something you're going to get just magically. It's just not. And most of us don't even know it well enough for ourselves to say it to our partners. So I think that's one of the big problems is this cultural expectation that we've all internalized and kind of almost adopted as our own belief. But sometimes, now this is a wonderful news. This is good news. Sometimes even us super competent, high achieving, like I'm super independent and I can figure it out type of people, sometimes even we grow enough in other areas of our life and it is really fucking helpful that we got help. And then we realize that we do need specialist help in intimacy and relationships. And that's what happened for me. I'm so glad it did. And it's what happens for a lot of my highly competent, high achieving clients, which is, I would say, a fair number of my clients. I think I attract these people because of who I am too. So let's take one. So my former client, let's call her Lisa, was very highly competent. She's a doctor. She owned her own practice. She was also a trained life coach who taught mindset work to other doctors. So she was a mindset trained life coach. She knew the cognitive tools in and out. She had applied them to herself with care, with rigor. She did the work, right? And yet, for years, nothing moved on the body shame, the struggle to be aroused, the sense that her sexuality was absent or shameful, the sense that when she came to me, that her body was wrong and it wasn't good enough. Didn't look good enough. It didn't behave the way she wanted it to. And her body was somehow deficient. And that's where she started. And it wasn't because she wasn't smart and it wasn't because she hadn't tried. She had tried everything she knew to try, but she didn't yet know that the problem wasn't in the place she was looking. And so I give her, and this all got solved. I give her and my other high achieving clients so much credit for actually being wise enough to reach out and seek new tools. But I also know how hard it is, right? And a lot of times people won't come forward until they get so desperate that they just can't tolerate it anymore. And frankly, I want to see you before that. It's going to be so much easier to solve. It is going to take you less time. It is going to take you less money. It is going to take you less effort to solve the issues if you haven't gotten totally desperate at your wit's end and you have barely any energy left to put in. That's the problem with waiting until you just cannot tolerate it anymore. I want to encourage everyone here by addressing some of the blocks for high achievers, especially in reaching out for the kind of specialist help I offer around attachment, intimacy, embodied sexuality, whether you work with me or somebody else. Just think about choosing action and help, even though it may not be something you're used to giving yourself permission for. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of the blocks. So one of them, I think, is this identity problem. And for high achievers, this is sort of how it gets built. We learn early that effort and intelligence gain approval and solve problems. We get rewarded for intelligence and or effort, being self-sufficient, being capable, being hardworking, being smart, figuring it out. We get reward and approval from that. And that can happen at home, it can happen at school, it can happen both. And asking for help then starts feeling like announcing failure instead of what it does in reality. Asking for help is about gathering resources. So in the real human world, getting help from other people means that you are gathering resources. That is a good thing. Mutual aid, mutual support, getting help from people who are good at this thing and you're good at that thing, right? And in our world now, we can exchange money for that kind of stuff, and that's great. We don't, if you're good at chopping logs into firewood and I'm really good at, hunting dinner down or like gathering tubers, we could have traded those things in the past. And now we trade our skills, the things that we're really good at, with money. Fine. We're going to put aside for just a second all of the like problems of capitalism and billionaires and everything, and just look at the basic premise here is that we can trade skill in one area for skill in another area that we might be missing. But instead of thinking about getting help as gathering resources from, and bartering with people who have these skills, it starts to feel, when we keep getting rewarded for problem solving, that asking for help is announcing failure. Like, I can't do it. And in some parts of life, it actually works really well to be super self-sufficient and figure everything out on your own. It can work pretty well for things like going to college, right? It can even work pretty well for certain domains of work. Doesn't work for all of them, right? But it can work for some. But the problem is that it creates this really specific blind spot. And it's the assumption that trying harder or knowing more will eventually break through any wall. And that's not true. We can't always try our way or know our way out of a problem. And in the kind of cognitive work sphere, like if therapy, mindset coaching, self-help, journaling, that kind of stuff, sometimes the trying harder can actually succeed, and it can fool us into thinking that it always works for everything. Because that work is like top down, right? You're using your thinking mind, and the more you think about stuff and the more you like change your thoughts, for example, or challenge your beliefs or reframe meanings, you can learn as a high achiever that you get some results. And it can fool you into thinking that that works for absolutely everything. And I've seen coaches and even some, CBT type therapists who mistakenly think it works for everything because they have that one tool, right? So they hit everything with that tool. It's like you've got a hammer, you think everything is a nail, right? But this body stuff, intimacy, relationships, this is embodied work. This is a nervous system is part of this. Your body, your history, your specific, even like just your nerve endings. The way that your body is physically made is part of this. And so Lisa, back to my client Lisa, she could articulate exactly when she came to me why her shame was irrational. She knew the theology she grew up was wrong. She could challenge every belief, and she totally intellectually understood that there was nothing wrong with her body or her desires. And yet, she could not get her body to feel free of shame. She could not stop generating a lot of the irrational thoughts and feelings. And that is reasonable. That is normal, because what she knows and what she feels are totally different systems. This was not a willpower problem. It wasn't a I haven't tried it hard enough problem. Lisa was having a different problem entirely. And it was the one that I was having too. So body up versus top down. I want to make this distinction for you so that you get like where you might be stuck if this sounds familiar. If that sounds like you at all, then think about this. Just take this in. There are two directions that information travels in your nervous system. We have top-down direction, your thoughts, your beliefs, your conscious intentions. This is where cognitive work operates. Awesome. Talking about it, reading a book, all that stuff. Genuinely useful. I've used it for a ton of stuff. It is not sufficient on its own for intimacy and relational dynamics. Body up is the other direction that information travels in the nervous system. And this is your body's accumulated experience, patterns that formed before you had language for them, or that happened so often that they went subconscious. right? And sometimes this is before we have any conscious memory, or sometimes it's just like even without our conscious memory, there was enough repetition that patterns of relational dynamics or patterns of unsafety, right? We learn those in our body and they become entrenched and ingrained. It's like autopilot. And these patterns are not accessible through thinking about them. You can intellectually think something totally different. And I have a number of clients where this is where they start. They're like, especially it's really obvious around like body shame type stuff. It's so clear because they'll think to themselves, I don't believe that theoretically I should feel ashamed of the size of my body. I don't believe that other people are bad because of the size of their body, but I can't stop feeling that way. And I just feel deep shame. That tells you that this is a nervous system issue. Things like touch aversion, things like just feeling uncomfortable, things like having like racing thoughts when you are in an intimate moment, things like where you're just having a lot of anxiety, right? All of these things. This is your nervous system. This is signals from your body's accumulated experience. You can't think your way out of that stuff. Tightening, shutting down, going numb, getting the ick, avoidance. All of that's bracing. All of that stuff, that's not beliefs talking. That's a nervous system talking. And it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's held its protection for years of an embodied experience of a lack of safety. And that kind of stuff has to be worked through the body, not around it with your brain. So, I want to point out that it's not that your brain has no part in this. Your brain is actually part of your body. Yay. And it is a powerful sex organ. And I had another high achieving client of mine, Laura M., and you can see her video testimonial on my website under the What Clients Say tab to see her face and see what she says in real time. But I'm just going to quote her briefly. She said, the brain is your most powerful sex organ. And she's right. When your brain is actually on your side, it becomes a very potent erotic tool. It's where our imagination lives, right? It's where we give ourselves permission to want what we want. It's where fantasy can generate desire. That's yummy. It's where we can get creative with our eroticism. But we have to do the body work first to feel safe enough to even have our brain be on our side. And so Lisa knew the mindset tools so well, but she needed someone who could tell the difference between a thought that she could reframe and a body pattern that we needed to move through and give her reparative experiences around so her body could start relaxing. She couldn't even find the judgments that she had on her own because they were so subconscious and accepted that they had become ingrained in her body. And so we needed body-based exercises to start uncovering those and to help her start de-shaming her own desires. Her desires were buried under so much shame that wanted her to repress them that she couldn't even find them with her mind, right? So this is just to say, we want to make sure that when you go to try to find a specialist, if you are a person who decides that you need help with intimacy and relationships and you're willing to get some, when you do go to find a specialist, let's look at giving yourself permission to really do it when you decide that this might be something you need, or even let yourself decide that this might be something you need, right? So nobody looks at a CEO who has an executive coach and also a running coach and thinks she's not good enough to figure out how to run on her own. I mean, somebody does, but they might be a total douche if they did, right? So most of us do not think, oh, she's got a running coach. She can't figure out how to run on her own. It's obvious to all of us that she's actually smart enough and resourced enough to go get the right specialist for the right domain, right? That's not weakness. That's how serious people operate. it's admirable and it's awesome. And she's decided she has some goals, she wants to hit them, and she's going to get the help she needs. That is boss. And so if you need support around body-based sex coaching, somatic sex coaching, that is a specialist tool. Doesn't have to be like a replacement for therapy or mindset coaching that you might have already done. That work is real and built something for you and you needed it. Awesome. But sometimes you got to pick up a different tool for a different problem or a different system that the other approaches weren't designed to reach, right? And so I think sometimes as high achievers, we forget to ask ourselves the right questions. We're calculating costs professionally all the time, right? What's the ROI, the return on investment? What's the opportunity cost here? What will I lose what's the sunk cost? Am I staying attached to something that I shouldn't stay attached to anymore because I've already put some time into it? From a business standpoint, a lot of times people can pivot and they can ask themselves these things because they've been trained to do it in a business framework. But we often are not applying that framework to our intimate life. And it's because we haven't been taught to do that. We've been taught that intimate life is some sort of private, figure it out yourself domain, which, as we've established, is totally crazy. So let's apply it to intimate life. What is the cost of staying in the wrong situation? What is the cost of not learning what lights you up? What is the return on investment of investing in having an amazing relationship that feels like a refuge and an erotic life that just brings you energy and joy and playfulness? What is the return on that investment? What would you get? How would that feel? And if you don't give that to yourself and you stay stuck in the situation that isn't great, what is the cost there, right? What is it costing you? So questions like, how long have you been aware that something isn't working for you? That's useful to know, asking yourself that, right? What has that cost you in terms of connection, resentment, in the low level, like background drain of a relationship that doesn't feel great? Thinking about what really actually calculating for yourself. All right, what kind of resources do I want to put into my own happiness? And where do I best allocate those, right? Well, if your closest relationships are the highest bang for your buck in terms of happiness, that might be a place that you decide someday, doesn't have to be today, but whenever you're ready or ready enough to notice that you're freaking tired of the situation and the status quo, it might be a place you decide you want to invest. So Lisa, at the end of our work together, said this. She said, if you think about the amount of money that people spend to feel sexy, buying things, trying to change your body, covering up your body, and then compare that to investing in a coach who can help you access what's actually been getting in your way, it just makes sense. She was talking about how she finally found the way forward and what changed for her. She found the right tool for the actual problem. And that's what I want for everybody, and not to tell yourself that you're somehow like, it's not okay for you to get help here. It's absolutely okay for you to get help here. And it's not just okay, it's really smart. And that's what people do when they actually have serious goals, is they find the right help. And that's not a weakness, that's a strength. Okay, so if you are someone like me who likes to truly understand your options, I also have something new for everyone that I just want to share with you today before I close out. And it's this low stakes starting point that I created. It's called the Pleasure Path Diagnostic. It is a deep dive questionnaire on your specific situation. And what I've done to make it easy, because a lot of people feel really overwhelmed in trying to describe what's going on for them, what I've done is I've made most of it, like I've put the words in there. You just have to see yourself. So I've taken all the most common patterns I see. I've put descriptions in there. You just get to choose like multiple choice. Does that feel like me or does this feel like me? Right? So it's not like you don't have to write essays, but this is a really deep dive questionnaire on your specific situation in your body, in your relationship history, in your attachment history, and in any relational dynamics that you have going on if you have a current partner. Then it's followed by a 45-minute call with me. And what happens on that is I have reviewed your specific answers. And so we just get right into figuring out exactly what's happening for you and mapping out what kind of tools that you would need to address those so that you leave knowing exactly what kind of things you would need to do to move the needle for you. So instead of these sort of like generic, like type, what's my type, all that kind of stuff that don't actually help you make change because they're not tailored to you, this is going to be tailored specifically to you. There's no pitch in this call. I'm not going to sell you anything. It is just for your clarity. I will not even I will leave it to you to decide if you want to ask me about how you would work with me or what kind of steps you would take. You can take those steps on your own. You can take it with another practitioner. Zero pressure because that's not how I roll. If you want to have this, it's $147 for now. I don't know how long it'll be that price because I honestly haven't decided. So if you want it, grab it now. There's a link in the show notes to find out more if you're interested in this. And I do still have some spots for the diagnostic open, but I to be honest, don't know how long I'm going to be doing this. So if this is something that you want, if you want to map a personalized map for how you're going to change your situation with zero obligations, go grab it. The link's in the show notes. All right, my dears, I will see you here next week.
Hey, before you go, if you enjoyed this show, I want to invite you to check out one of my favorite things that I've ever created. It's a free guide called Get Out of Your Head, a starter guide to releasing the pressure, shame, and shoulds around intimacy. It has 4 reflection exercises that go deeper than anything you'll find in a typical freebie, and most people feel a shift just after part 1. So go grab it at laurajergens.com/guide. The link is in the show notes. And if you're ready to find out what your specific path looks like, I'd love to talk to you. Booking info is also in the show notes, and I will see you here next week.